Good morning. We're going to get started. I know this isn't the easiest building sometimes to find, so we're expecting more to arrive soon. But I want to welcome you. I'm Debbie Walsh. I'm the director of the Center for American Women and Politics at the Eagleton Institute of Politics here at Rutgers University. And I am really delighted to see so many of you here on a Saturday morning for today's program, Shape New Jersey's Future and Yours, Appointments to State Boards and Commissions. Since 1981, CAWP has convened women leaders from both political parties to participate in our bipartisan coalition for women's appointments. These women, who are committed to seeing diverse women's voices represented in state government, work to secure commitments from gubernatorial nominees on both sides of the aisle to appoint women to positions throughout their administration. And as we mark the historic moment of New Jersey electing its second woman governor and its first Democratic woman governor, it is a moment of change and opportunity. And that opportunity is why CAWP is once again partnering with our friends at the Women's Political Caucus of New Jersey to present a program to educate and inform women across the state about the process of securing an appointment to one of the many state board and commission positions that are available. Women and people of color are significantly underrepresented in these important positions, and today's program is about turning that around. I want to thank my colleagues Jean Sinsdak and Kai Barrios, along with Chrissy Buteas and Megan Hutton with the Caucus, who have put together an extraordinary agenda with some of the state's leading experts on the appointments process, as well as the folks who understand the politics of appointments. Our morning is broken into 4 sessions. The first focuses on understanding what are the kinds of appointed positions available in state government. Then we are honored to have the voice of the new administration, represented by Kelly Doucette, the executive director of the Cheryl Caldwell transition, who will give you her insights into the process, followed by a panel that will focus on practical strategies for getting appointed. And then finally, we will close with a conversation between 2 former directors of appointments to explore what your next steps should be. And with that overview, I am delighted to turn the microphone over to Eileen Kean, the president of the Women's Political Caucus of New Jersey.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So first, it is such a great pleasure to be at the College Avenue campus. I am a graduate of Rutgers, and I haven't really been on this campus in a while, and it's just wonderful to see the very tasteful architectural development that has gone on College Avenue. So it really moved me, so I'm happy to be here on a Saturday morning. I am so honored to be the president of the Women's Political Caucus, and indeed, Deb is right, this is just such a wonderful transition that we are entering into to have our second female governor. And I'm already blessed because I'm a member of the New Jersey State Board of Pharmacy. I'm also the chairwoman of the Monmouth County Board of Elections. So I've been in your seats, and I through the help of these organizations, I learned how to successfully be appointed and to serve, because it really does provide a wonderful dimension to your careers and to your life as being a resident of New Jersey. So recently I was in the room when there were some men politicians talking, and sorry to the guys in the audience, but I am addressing the women today. And a question arose, and this was the answer that was given made me stop and think. So the question was, aren't you allowed to pump your own gas in New Jersey, right? And the answer given by the men was, well, Jersey girls don't pump gas. Okay, so I'm trying to get you guys enthused. So, are we Jersey girls? Yes. Are we strong? Yes. The big question, can Jersey girls pump gas? Yes. Yeah, okay, all right. So, thank you, everybody, and enjoy the program, and I'll be around, and I hope to meet many of you.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. I'm thrilled to hear all the energy in the room. I think we should have another round of applause. We have just elected our second female governor in our state's history. So again, welcome to today's panel on public service through appointments. We're going to talk a little bit about our state, county, and local appointments. I know many folks are very informed about the elected process, but what is a little bit less visible is the appointment process. But they really do influence a lot of funding as well as provide critical guidance on decision making throughout state government, but this is also applicable to local government as well. So what are we going to do here today? We're going to demystify that process for you all, and what these roles are and how they work and how you can contribute your public service to them. And so our panelists throughout the day have a depth of experience that they're going to share with you, and I am thrilled to be a part of this program. I am Chrissy Buteas. I have the pleasure of being the president and CEO of the Healthcare Institute of New Jersey, which represents the pharmaceutical industry in the state. But more importantly for here today, I serve as the Education and Training Chair for the Women's Political Caucus of New Jersey. And I just want to thank CAWP for the partnership that we've been doing this program for many years now, and also want to acknowledge our board members in attendance, our Executive Director, Megan Hutton, who played an integral part of putting this together. And I also want to just welcome all of WPC's new fellows who are joining us here today, who are going to have a wonderful experience learning about the process as well. So welcome, everyone. So, just here, round of applause. So why don't we're going to start with the basics, but first I'm going to introduce our two panelists. So bear with me here for a moment. You have seen their bios on the website, but just let me start with introducing Tara Dowdell. She is the founder and president of TDG Speakers and the Tara Dowdell Group, a marketing and strategic communications firm that helps socially conscious organizations and businesses grow. She has obviously been a huge component of working with CAWP throughout the years through the Ready to Run program, as well as this program 8 years ago. So thank you, Tara. And she also served as the appointments director in the Office of the Governor, the youngest person and the first Black person to serve in this role. And in that role, she led the office responsible for the selection, nomination, and appointment of individuals to over 550 state boards. So obviously a great resource to have here today. Join me in welcoming Tara. And now again, let me welcome Christine Shipley. Christine is the managing director of Stevens & Lee. Christine also served for 10 years as the executive director of the New Jersey Senate Republican office, where she developed close ties to legislators on both sides of the aisle. She was very critical in working with the appointments process with the Senate Judiciary Committee as well. And Christine has been a strong proponent of all CAWP programs, but very importantly, a member of the Women's Political Caucus Board as well. So join me in welcoming Christine. All right, so folks, this is going to be interactive. We're going to spend the morning together, ask questions. We want to hear from you, but I can assure you that we have two experts to kick off our day. So I have a series of questions I'm going to ask, and I hope that you are writing down your questions so you can certainly chime in as well. All right, let's get started. Tara, we're going to kick it off with you. To start off, can you explain what boards, commissions, and authorities actually are?
Absolutely. And first, before I start, I just want to thank the Women's Political Caucus, Eileen, Kean, the board, Chrissy, thank you so much for including me, and of course, the Center for American Women in Politics, Jean Sinzak and Debbie Walsh. I just want to commend you for just continuing to do such excellent programming and such practical and pragmatic programming for us. So yes, I think before I begin, I just want to say there is a lot of information you're going to receive today. This is a pretty robust process, appointments. There's a lot of things to learn. So I'm going to really try to cover the high level, the most important, and prioritize those things for you. But in terms of boards and commissions, really, I think you want to think about them the way you would think of any board or commission, whether it be a nonprofit board, whether it be a corporate board, because there are a lot of similarities, right? So I'm going to walk you through each one, but I'm going to cite some examples so that you can understand it from a very practical sense. So when you think about the advisory commissions, for instance, those are primarily focused on making recommendations around policy. So they make recommendations to the governor around various policies. So an example of that would be the Advisory Commission on the Status of Women. It was established by the state legislature in 1974, and they make policy recommendations around equity issues related to women. They conduct programming. And another important thing to understand about the boards and commissions is that they have staff, right? So if you serve on these boards as a volunteer, there is staff infrastructure to support you. So I think that's a critical component of understanding how they work. Next are the task forces. So often those are created in response to an issue, right? So the governor will create a task force because something blew up to make recommendations, to be quite frank, something usually blew up. And so one example would be the task force on campus sexual assault, which was established in 2015. So a task force like that would typically come out with a report, again, making policy recommendations. So that's sort of the role that the board members will play on that type of entity. Then you have the state boards of like chiropractic examiners, state board of medical examiners, the pharmacy board that Eileen mentioned. So those boards operate a little bit differently from what I just named. So they're involved with the actual licensing of those industries, right? So what's important for those boards is yes, they have public members. And what that means is those are folks who don't have to be pharmacists. They don't have to be chiropractors. They don't have to be doctors, but they also have very specific seats for the people in those industries. And so those boards have a lot of power because not only do they provide licensing, but they also consider if there's a complaint against a doctor, if there's a complaint against a professional that they're overseeing, then they examine those complaints. And the reason why that's so important, when I was in the governor's office, when I first came in, there were very surprisingly very few women on these boards. And there were very few women on boards across the board. I think the number was something like 20%. And so when you have a board that's all men and you're receiving a complaint about sexual harassment, say for instance, right? It actually leaves the state more vulnerable to litigation. So we found there were fewer lawsuits once we diversified these boards. So that's really important just for good governance. And then the last that I will talk about is the authorities. So Turnpike Authority, Port Authority, these are very, very powerful boards. And so I will give you one example of why these boards are so powerful. And all of them matter, right? New Jersey is one of those places where all of these boards have a very strong role to play, and they play that role in our government, right? But these boards control a lot of wealth and resources. So for instance, the Turnpike Authority Board of Commissioners voted to approve a program, an infrastructure program, the Newark Bay Hudson County Extension Improvements Program. That is a $10.7 billion program. It is the largest infrastructure program in the United States ongoing at this moment. So these commissioners had a say in whether or not that program moved forward. And I raise that because that board has 0 women on it. Mm-hmm. So just to give you a sense about, you're all here because you want to be a part of this, right? You want to learn. But just to give you a sense of why it matters and the scale and the scope and the responsibility. Because one thing I've learned, and this is the last thing I'll say because Chrissy's like gonna get the hook. But this is the last thing I'll say is that, and this is really important, a lot of this process is about persistence and what I refer to as polite persistence. So you want to be persistent. Mm-hmm. You want to do your homework and research because as I mentioned, it's complex. but you have to be this in government, the squeaky wheel gets the oil.
Great. Thanks, Tara. That's really a great map of what these authorities are. But let's turn it over to Christine. There are different types of state appointments. So can you talk to us a little bit about the difference between what a direct appointment is, an advice and consent appointment is, and the approval process for these appointments?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And as Tara said, many thanks to the Center for American Women in Politics and the Women's Political Caucus of New Jersey. Events like this are so important, and like Tara said, you have a lot of very important boards where women are not serving, so it's, definitely we need to get more women involved. But to get to Chrissy's question, there are direct appointments, which usually the statutory law typically governs a lot of these boards and commissions. So you want to take a look when you do your research to see, does the governor have a direct appointment? Does the Senate president or the speaker have a direct appointment? Because then that will give you sort of a guide as to who you should try to get to and have that, polite persistence to get involved. And even, I know we might get to this a little later, but there's also local boards, there's county level boards and commissions that you might want to research as well. Sometimes it's good to get your start at that level, and you could, get on those boards by going to, say, your local mayor or council, or at the county level, the county executive, so there's a lot of opportunities out there, So as far as advice and consent appointments, some of your more major boards, like college boards, for example, they will need a nomination from the governor and then the advice and consent of the Senate. And once you get to that point, there's something called senatorial courtesy, which, having served with the Judiciary Committee as an aide back in my early career, that was always key to watch, and the senators have senatorial courtesy over their home county and then the towns in their legislative districts. So they wield a lot of power, and even if you're in the minority, that kind of gets you in the mix, because then you're interacting with your Democrat colleagues as well on nominations. So it's kind of a unique position that the senators hold. So you want to do outreach to your local senator, to try to get their, approval of your nomination, and a lot of that groundwork is laid early on, especially at the judicial level, and we can go through that process a little bit more later, but, and there's also approval appointments, which are more, say if you have a commissioner who wants to establish more of an advisory board, that they will make a recommendation to the governor, and those are approved by the governor, so the commissioner basically says, here's who I want on this panel to advise me on X, Y, or Z, and then that goes back to the governor for approval. So those are the main ways of, the different types of appointments and how you get approved, so.
Thanks, Chrissy. You did mention judicial. Do you want to briefly just talk a little bit about the judicial appointments?
Yep. Essentially, there's some mystery behind this process to some extent, because there's a lot of dealings that go on behind the scenes. Say, a legislator will go to the governor and say, I have an attorney in my district who I think would be great to serve on the judiciary. Governor may start looking into that person. And then goes to a committee called JPAC. It's the Judicial, let me see if I got the acronym right, but it's basically through the State Bar Association. You have county representatives on that commission who then interview the person, do an in-depth interview process, and then make a recommendation to the governor as to whether or not that appointment should proceed or not. Now, that happened, I guess, under Governor Hughes originally. JPAC was created. There have been some issues over the years, with controversial, I say Lisa Chapman talking, she'll know, from the State Bar Association, but, they basically under Governor Whitman, there was an issue, with an appointment, and she sort of withdrew for a bit. Governor Christie ended up saying, I will take your recommendation, but I don't have to abide by it, that kind of thing. So the governors have some latitude as to how they want to use the JPAC process. But for the most part, the governors take their advice, and, once that moves through, the governor will then do there's an extensive four-way background check on the person that the state police do. Then the nomination is submitted to the legislature. It's a notice of intent gets filed, and then typically 7 days later, it goes in as an official nomination. And obviously that you go through the regular senatorial courtesy process, and you're interviewed by the Judiciary Committee, and hopefully if all that goes well, then you get voted on by the full Senate, and your nomination is approved, so.
Great.
Yeah.
So we've already talked, I want to touch on two things. One is I'm going to pause and say we're going to come back to local and county in a minute, so get ready for that. But we've already touched on a couple of times, well, there's a regulatory body and a task force, some are appointed by the governor, some are appointed by the speaker. I'm sure folks might be thinking, that's great, where do you find all that out? I mean, I'd be curious about that. So can someone, before we get too far in our conversation, maybe just touch on, there's a lot of things being thrown out already. Where would you go to say, oh my God, like where would I find what you're referring to?
So the governor's website, the state of New Jersey website, has a page dedicated to boards and commissions. I would say I think some of the information might be a little bit dated, but we do have a new administration coming in. So that information will be updated. I think they're probably going to take an inventory and kind of make sure it's as up to date and robust as possible. But that's where you can start, because either way, it just gives you a lot of information that you can utilize regardless. So I think that's a very good place to start. I know some people will probably use our good friend Chat, and Chat GPT. I just caution you to just be a little careful with that. Use it, but just be a little careful with it, just because the information is in flux, right? So you may not get the best information. So I think it's probably best just to go straight to the source, and then call the appointments office. When I was appointments director, we got lots of calls, lots of emails, reach out. And again, that's where that polite persistence comes into play.
And our next panel will give a little bit more breadth into some of the politics around that as well. So hold those questions for a little bit. But we did touch about county and local appointments. So if we could also just highlight the same thing. I got my start on local boards and commissions, and it was a great learning experience. And so where would folks look to find out about those opportunities, and how may they pursue those in a decision-making process? How is that made on the local and county level as well?
I was just taking a peek myself this week. Mercer County, for example, has a commission on voter accessibility that nobody's serving on yet. It's like you can go to the county websites typically, and they'll have a list of their boards and commissions. They'll show who's on it if there is a vacancy. In my township, in Hopewell Township, I noticed there's some at least alternate vacancies on several boards, that type of thing. So I mean, again, use your resources on the web. Most municipalities and counties have great websites that will have all of that information. And then, you go to, if it's a county position, best bet to go to the county executive's office, and your municipality, go to your mayor, town council, to try to find out how you could submit a resume. Sometimes I even saw that they have links where you can submit a resume and show your interest. So that helps,
Great. And I would assume some folks might be thinking, wow, I might not be an expert in that. Do I need to be an expert to put my name forward?
No, typically no. Like Tara said, I mean, a lot of these boards at the state level especially have staff at the departments, or say if it's a professional licensing board, there'll be attorney, one of the attorneys from the Attorney General's office will work with that board. I would assume the same thing is true at the county and municipal level. You're going to have your professionals who, you're at the county level. I would assume it's like, you have a general counsel for the county, or for the local municipality. You have municipal attorneys who are going to be there to help, and other, business managers, and all of that. So, I mean, I think there's people there who can help you, they just want people to serve, so.
So plus to everything that Chrissy just said, but I also would offer just one caveat around it is that for some boards, there are very prescribed roles, right? So, for instance, I referenced the task force on campus sexual assault. So there are some very prescribed roles. As someone who works at a county college has to sit on that board, right? For obvious reasons. Someone who works at a college or university has to sit on that board for obvious reasons, or that task force, I should say. So a lot of these boards and commissions, authorities, are established by statute, right? And that's some law was passed by the state legislature at some point in time to create them, right? Some date back decades and decades. Some are newer. Many of the task force were established directly by the governor through executive order. But nonetheless, while you don't have to be, if it's a more generalized position, as Christine stated, you don't have to be a subject matter expert, because sometimes they actually don't want you to be, right? So for the public members on the State Board of Chiropractic Examiners, right, they don't, they want to have people who are not chiropractors, because obviously if you're a chiropractor, you're probably a little bit, well, let me stop there. But you understand what I'm saying, right? So as a public person, you would come to the table with a much more objective perspective, right? Because you're not in it. So in that sense, people want you to have like sort of almost this clean slate, right? And be just someone who is going to do the work. But for these other ones where the roles are very specific, and this is where the research comes in and why you should go to the website, the governor's website, is because you want to look and see where it is that there are specific requirements. And if you fit that requirement, and you may want to be on a board where you are a subject matter expert, right? It all depends on what you are looking for.
So why don't we try to transition now to ethics and transparency a bit. So how would somebody navigate like conflicts of interest and address those? And then also how do these boards interact with the public and or their agency leadership at the state and or local level? So a little bit about the conflict of interest, and then heading into how do they interact with stakeholders and their agency leadership?
Okay. The conflicts of interest law and the code of ethics under the statute applies to government employees and the government officers, also special state officers or employees. So it will kind of depend on which board or commission you're serving on as to whether those ethics the laws will apply to you. And the same is true with financial disclosure. Usually every governor at the start of their administration will file an executive order saying these are the boards and commissions to which you would have to file a financial disclosure form. So Governor Murphy had done Executive Order 2, and it lists all of the boards and commissions that are subject to that requirement. Like, for example, my colleague at Stevens and Lee serves on the Capital Reinvestment Commission for Trenton, so he has to file a financial disclosure form. But again, there'll be guidance for you. You can go to the appointments office, like Tara said. If you're going to end up being nominated for that position, you'll be able to learn what you would be and wouldn't be subject to. And I mean, and the financial disclosure forms are pretty detailed. So you want to consider that, I guess. If you're going for a certain position, whether you want to be able to have all that information be public or not. Now, as far as do you want to go into the Open Public Meetings Act and things like that?
Yeah, and Tara, you might have something to add from the financial disclosure piece too, but yes, meetings, they're open to the public. Talk a little bit about the transparency component as well.
Well, the only thing I would add about the financial disclosures is not every board requires that.
Right.
So, so I don't want the expectation to be that every time you go on the board, you have to complete a financial disclosure. However, if it is a board like the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which I would argue is probably the most powerful of all of the boards and authorities, you will absolutely have to fill out a financial disclosure, and you, I believe, are subject to a background check. I'm pretty sure it might even be at least a 3-way background check, and 3- and 4-way background checks are criminal, employment, financial, and character. Again, not every board, the overwhelming majority of boards do not require that. However, depending on the nature of what the board and the sensitivity of what that board is handling, and the potential for influence, right, in a negative sense or a legal sense or ethical sense, then the likelihood is greater that you will have to complete those that type of paperwork. But for a lot of the boards, that's not the case. I think the ethics laws have gotten stronger, so you probably would have to, for more boards than when I was appointments director, you have to fill out ethics disclosure, do an ethics disclosure on an annualized basis.
And there's ethics training as well, yeah.
Yeah, for instance, if you don't want to have your salary be derived on a board that you're voting on, or if you serve on multiple boards, you just need to disclose what they are so that they're obviously not competing with one another, and you're just fully transparent about that.
And one thing I'd add on that is I'm on some nonprofit boards, and I have to file an ethics form every year. So I think it's I wouldn't say this is sort of becoming the norm across all boards,
Which is good governance.
Yep.
Okay. So why don't we then shift over to what boards actually look like? So does anybody want to jump in and talk about that process and kind of like what they actually look like at this point in time? Like some of the specifics around what the application, how would you go about filling out the application, and some of the common questions that are asked?
So I think first and foremost, you want to make sure you have your resume to the extent that you can. I mean, I don't want to be Captain Obvious, but I also don't want to assume. I try not to ever make assumptions, because I know there's some people in this room, I know you, so I know you're on boards, I know you're on commissions, I know there's some people in the room who may only be on nonprofit boards or never served on a board. So I just want to be cognizant of that. But so you need to start with your resume. To the greatest extent possible, you want to tailor that resume to the boards of interest, right? I would say if you're outreaching directly to, which I recommend, right, directly to the governor's appointments office, or as we talked about, the Senate president has some appointments, the assembly speaker has some appointments. So whoever you're outreaching to, I would say have a list, like your first choice and a few other choices, because you don't want to leave it to them to figure that out for you. And the likelihood, especially in a new administration, they're going to be running 800 miles per hour. They're going to be doing everything all at once, right? So you want to make it as easy as possible on the folks on the staff, right, that will be receiving this information. So you want to list out the things, the boards of interest to you. You want to make sure your resume is tailored as effectively as possible to those boards. You also want to, I would highly recommend a cover letter as well, as short but engaging, effective cover letter. And then the application, like a big part of it is asking, for the most part, is what are your qualifications, right? That's a big part of it. The other stuff is pretty much in line with what you would expect on the standard application: your name, your address, your location, all of those type of things. But I think that the bigger part of it is really making the case for why you qualify. And then the other piece I would say, and I don't want to get too ahead of some of the other panelists that will come in later, but you want to have some recommendations, right? To the extent that the governor's office or the Senate president or the assembly speaker know that you're already coming to the table and have cleared some of the politics, that will be very helpful to you.
Great. So I'm sure a lot of folks are thinking, well, are these boards paid? Are they unpaid? I have a full-time job. Can I put my name forward? How much of a time commitment are they? Are they like another part-time job, or are they just a couple hours every quarter? So can someone talk to us a little bit about what to expect and how some of those boards and authorities may differ?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on the board, once again. And a lot of the, as far as whether it's paid or unpaid, is usually set out in statute. Again, so that website Tara referred to as far as state boards and commissions is invaluable, because every time you click on the link, there's a statutory reference there, and it will give you the details. And a lot, I was checking into this as well. A lot of the boards and commissions typically meet on a monthly basis. And again, it's going to be dependent on the board as to, how long those meetings will go. There's advisory commissions, though, that say meet quarterly and, give advice to a commissioner or something like that. So it's not as, intensive. locally though, I've heard people serve on planning boards who are there for hours upon hours, at night, so it's like, so it depends, I guess is the answer, and so you just have to do a little bit of digging, and try to find out about that particular board or commission, so. Yep.
Karen, do you have anything to add, or you're good?
I saw the sign. I don't have my glasses on, so I saw the sign go.
Said 15 minutes.
Okay.
I never saw me squinting as I was looking right
I'm
into the light.
nearsighted, so I just saw a blank piece of paper. But I knew that blank piece of paper meant wrap it up.
Yeah. So we want to make sure we have time for questions. So is everybody almost prepped? Because I'm going to ask in about one, but I want to ask at least one more question. So going to qualifications and diversity and what boards are looking for. I know, and guys, we got to get at it. We got to get over this. But I'm sure some folks are thinking, I'm not qualified. If I hear anyone ask me that, nobody raised that. You're qualified. So, again, according to statute, of course. But please, talk to us about what are the professional backgrounds that these boards are looking for. I know they have diverse requirements and all, but should that deter anybody from putting their name forward? Like, what's the best advice you can give the group on the whole qualification conversation?
No, it should not deter you from putting your name forward. So that was the easiest answer.
Okay, because we have some young folks in here too, so I don't want to deter them either.
Right.
So.
Well, I think that's great because I think that folks are looking for more younger voices. I myself am super young. No, I'm kidding. At the ripe old age of 22. No, folks are looking for younger voices, especially, and I think there's opportunity to, especially when you think of like the State Board of Education or boards where there is a direct impact, right, on your lives. I think it's important to put your name forward and lean into the fact, right, that you're young and you're going to bring a fresh perspective to the table. So I would highly encourage that, and that actually, I think, compensates for the fact that, of course, if you're 21, you haven't really been in the workforce very long, or you may not have as many credentials, right? But you do have perspective. You do have other value adds to bring to the table. The only other thing I want to go back to, since you said we did have a little time, is that most boards are not paid. I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. The overwhelming majority of boards are not paid. There are some that are. State board, county boards of taxation. Every county has a board of taxation. Those are paid positions, but most are volunteer. However, at the end of the day, they are, really, they give you a role in your government and the outcomes for the state of New Jersey.
Yeah, and why don't we open it up to questions? But I do want to say it is important though to put yourself out there and to maybe even sign up for something you're not comfortable with. I know I got my start in my 20s on our public celebrations committee. And it was just a great opportunity to get to know folks, but then that led into the Board of Adjustment. And by the way, I have absolutely no land use background, but I learned quite a bit about it, which then I got to go on to different boards on the state level, et cetera. So it doesn't hurt to start somewhere and get to know folks and then build upon that. So, all right, we have questions, which is great. How do I start? Right here, and then we'll go over that way. And I don't want to neglect this side of the room either. We have a lot of questions. And speak up, please.
Damali Robinson, Glen Rock, New Jersey. I noticed on Governor-elect Sherrill's website that when you fill out like the interest for any of these boards and commissions, it allows you to select like multiple boards or commissions or areas of interest. Is that something that would be, beneficial or potentially frowned upon because it looks like you're spreading yourself too thin?
It would be beneficial. That's another easy one. Definitely beneficial.
At least you're showing you want to serve in some capacity, and it gives them options to look at. Yeah.
Great. Two questions right here, and then we'll go on this side of the room. Right here in the orange, please.
Could you just repeat the four-way background check?
Oh, so the four-way background check is criminal, financial, employment, and character.
Great. Right here.
Morning, Highland Park Sustainable Health Park Commission. My question is this: don't you think that in over focusing on youth, input and inclusion of the youth segment of our population into this commission, aren't you overlooking the vast pool of experience of the middle-aged and older women who are underemployed or on empty nesters who can actually contribute very well to our community?
I think ultimately, when I was appointments director, I was looking for everybody, right? Like, so it was never about one group versus another group. I was looking for our boards and commissions to reflect the state of New Jersey, right? And that is, I think, very consistent. I don't want to speak for the Sherrill administration, but very consistent with what they've said, right, on the campaign trail. I think it's about making sure that all voices are represented, not one group over the other.
Yes, and we have that question about diversity. Certainly, I think that'll come up in the next panel as well, around whether it's party affiliation, age, cultural background, all very important. So everyone should be encouraged to apply.
Yep.
Absolutely. Right here, and then we'll go over here.
Hi, my name is Shima Maduddin. You mentioned like persistence. Could you speak a little bit more on, I'm sure with persistence there needs to be a level of patience, especially when you occupy spaces with people that have different opinions, and how do you balance between the persistence and the patience?
That's first of all, great question. So one thing just for context, because when I was appointments director, it was a new administration, right? And so the new administration is going to be inundated. I'm sure they already are, well, I know they already are inundated. So the patience comes with the fact that I do encourage everybody just to be patient. Don't think because if you don't hear back right away that it's just that the sheer volume that a new administration encounters of people who want to participate is very challenging to manage, because you're also coming in and it's a learning curve, because you have to learn, get information from the prior administration. There's all kinds of things that happen, right? So I just want to encourage people to be patient and because of those dynamics. The polite persistence, I would say, absolutely is important for government. I would actually say, for appointments, I'd actually argue it's important for anything government, right? And so what I mean by that in a more specific sense is send your materials, right? Follow up to make sure your materials have been received, and sort of pace out persistence, right? But, don't call every day, right? And I know that sounds sort of maybe simple, but people call me every day. Some people a couple of times a day. So multiple emails, right? So I would say sort of pace it out, right? So that it's polite. And just and be transparent. Look, I would have people say to me, and I appreciate this, I am eager, and I don't mean to bother you. I hope I'm not pushing too hard, but I'm very interested in this. So that's what I mean by polite persistence.
Yeah, but Tara, I think it's important to note that the administration has a 4-year term. So what you might come to expect is an acknowledgement that they received your application, but you may not hear back because technically they have 4 years?
Yep. Yes.
4 years to make such appointment. Not true in every case, but just keep that in mind.
And then you raise an excellent point, Chrissy, too, because the other piece is that the boards you're interested in may not have any openings because they're terms, right? And often the terms are staggered on each board, so you may not be getting a consistent communication just because there is nothing to communicate until that term is up. So I think that's also an important part of the research that you do. You want to pace it and make sure that if you're applying for a certain set of boards, make sure that they're open seats. Now, there's going to be, when they come in, they're going to have to, every administration, this is not, I want to just say this is not an indictment on the prior administration, it's just the nature of the beast. When they come in, they're going to have to do some cleanup, right? So some things may not be, you might think something's open and maybe it's not, right? And that's nobody's fault, it's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, there's over 500 of these. So right here, please.
Hi, Mary Knowles from Montclair. So my understanding is not every board is equally active. And so how do you suggest assessing how impactful a board really is? It might look great on paper, but maybe they don't really meet often, or they're not really doing much.
Right. That's a great question. I've been talking a lot.
No. Yeah, no, I mean, again, talking with the appointments director and their staff is a great first avenue. Also, I would think like if it's a particular board with a certain area of interest that it covers, you're going to probably be able to figure out some stakeholders who might know, give them a call and say, hey, has this committee met, and how have they been really impactful or not, and that kind of thing, because you're right. I mean, there are definitely some that are there on paper and the legislature thought it was good to create them and they haven't been established yet, and they haven't done anything, so yeah, it sort of just requires a little homework. I mean, even some of your legislative office staff might know, so that might help as well.
Some of the department websites for which those boards fall under, you may want to check to see if they have any regular minutes posted as well.
Yeah.
Yes, right here.
Hi, I'm Kate Kelly. I live in Verona, and I also work for the Supportive Housing Association of New Jersey. We've run 2 initiatives that are state funded to encourage people with disabilities and barriers to be better integrated. And now we have run one running to learn leadership skills to be on boards
Great.
and advisory groups. So what advice would you have? I feel, and I think most people feel, the expertise of being lived experience with a disability, you can bring that to a variety of boards and commissions, but people may be concerned about what accessibility they would have to either applying or to being part of meetings. Is there any advice you could give on how people can navigate that and know they can truly be able to participate if they have a disability?
That's a great question. I think that at this point, I think most of the boards and commissions, with some exceptions, probably have a lot of resources for folks. I think and I've seen it, right, firsthand. So I think that's one thing that folks should know. If you are someone with disabilities, I do think that's important perspective. And I think there is we have come a long way in understanding that, making sure that inclusion really is inclusion, right? And I think that to lean into that also when you apply, because I think there is an acknowledgement that, again, it's about perspectives, right? It's about having people have a seat at the table who offer varying perspectives to ensure that the outcomes for this state serve everybody in the state, right? So I think that you should, I know that sometimes people are concerned about disclosing, right, certain, and if it's something people don't want to disclose, then, I recognize that and understand that, but I think that it is useful. And I was appointments director a while ago, and for me that was important, right? It was important that diversity also included people with disabilities, right? And because I knew that when, like we talked about the licensing, the boards that are responsible for licensing. So if there's a lawsuit and it's around accessibility, right? You're going to bring a perspective to that issue that otherwise might not be brought, which could literally lead to a lawsuit if it's not brought, right? So I think that people should not be afraid to share and to lean into whatever it is that makes it a unique strength for you.
Question? Any other questions? None? Okay. Well, what has been very exciting too is that the Cheryl Kelly from Governor-elect Cheryl's campaign is here, has heard your questions, so I'm sure it can be maybe integrated in some of her remarks as well. But I do want to also encourage you to use both CAWP but WPC as a resource in your board journey as well. And so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But I know that we have several other panels and/or speakers coming up. So many more opportunities to have your questions answered. So please join me in thanking both Tara and Chrissy for their